I would say doing like efforts like that are super high power that I don't typically see people doing where because in a race it's the how many times you go over 600 watts in a road race is insane.
Mhm.
And I don't see as many people, a lot of people are doing a lot, a lot of threshold, a lot of endurance, a lot of VO2, but like to actually win a race or drop someone, you have to go really high power.
Hey, everybody, we got Scott McGill from Project Echelon on the podcast today. He doesn't call himself a sprinter, but everybody probably knows him as an extremely fast finisher, and he goes in on some nitty-gritty details about training and racing the upcoming year, talking about Nationals 2025. If you haven't seen the power files from that race last year, you should probably look them up. Everybody, good luck with your training and racing. Scott, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Your vibe, you rather ride alone, or is it more of like you're so specific with your training, or
No,
what's...
definitely not so specific with my training. It's more like there's just not that many people that ride around where I live. To be honest,
Okay.
like when I went to school, I would ride with people all the time. But like there's just not that many cyclists, and then if they are, they have a regular job, so it doesn't really like align with my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, we'll actually go in on. We're gonna start with that because I like that insight. But let's do it. Let's do a quick intro, and then yeah. First off, let's just do the basic. Who's Scott McGill?
Okay. Are we recording it?
We're recording. We just
Oh,
kind of
all right,
roll
all
into
right.
it. Is that
Yeah.
cool with you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do
Um,
it.
I'm 26 years old from Falston, Maryland. I ride for Project Echelon racing currently, which is a continental team in the U.S., but we do quite a bit of racing in Europe. Um, yeah, pretty much
Cool.
it.
And you're in Maryland. Which
Yep.
whereabouts in Maryland are you? I don't know where
Uh,
Falston is.
Northeast of Baltimore.
Okay.
So, like, if you picture the Chesapeake Bay, the top of the Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and then you're going. You had mentioned you're going to Spain next week, right? Does that kick off the season?
Yeah. So I believe next Wednesday we start racing in Mallorca, which is like it's called Challenge Mallorca. It's 5 one-day races in a row, so that's kind of like unique that it's not a stage race. So you can bring like 12 riders and sub in and out each day, and then you could not finish one day and start the next day, and yeah.
What do you guys feel? How do you feel about that? As a pro, it not being a stage race, is that do you guys like that more? Like, oh, we can sub in somebody else for that's better suited for this day, not
Um,
stage, or would you rather another stage race, or does it not matter?
I mean, I don't think it really matters that much. It just kind of gives everyone a chance because the team is 15 riders. So
Mm,
it gives everyone a chance to kind of race to test themselves, I guess, in the first part of the season. I think we have 12 or 13 guys going.
okay,
So if it was just a normal stage race, it would only be 7 guys.
okay,
That also makes it more difficult logistically because you have 12 bikes to then, or more than 12 bikes to deal with, and more people to move around and all that. So, yeah.
how many extra bikes do you guys have to bring?
Um, Usually in Europe, like because we're constantly bouncing back and forth, and we don't have like a warehouse or something in Europe to store stuff, we bring like between 3 and 4 spare bikes
Okay,
um, to a race. But then, yeah, sometimes there'll be more if it's easier to get to. But
yeah.
yeah, checking that much luggage is not easy or cheap.
I must say, whenever I watch like guys are posting stuff on Instagram of their trip over and they've got the 2 bikes and the
Yeah,
bags and this, I'm like, man, there's a skill to that I'm sure most of us amateurs have no understanding of.
yeah, and I do not have those packing skills. That's for sure.
What's okay, so for context, it's January 24th. This probably won't come out for a couple months, I want people to understand where this question is in time. So if you're going to race next week, can you just give us like a overview of maybe what's November, December, January been like for you? Do you look at it as, we always hear people talk about base training? Are you still doing cross stuff? Are you like doing something totally different? When you look back on the last 3 months, what has Scott been doing?
So I don't do cross anymore, at least
Okay.
this year. My last race was Tour of Britain, so it was beginning of September, and then I got married in October, so I didn't ride between between Tour of Britain and the wedding.
Congrats.
So
That's
that was
awesome.
probably the biggest time I've had where I haven't ridden a bike in the last 10 years, probably. Which
How
was
long of
good.
a break was that? Sorry.
Probably 5 weeks or
Okay.
6 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
But it wasn't like intentionally, like it was like I had a lot of other stuff going on, so I just didn't think
Mm-hmm.
about riding or ride. And then, started, easing back into it a little bit and doing a lot of gym work. So like 3 days a week in the gym, I'd say, between, October, November, and the beginning of December. And then, tried to start putting on some miles, maybe mid-December, start doing more like typical base training of just, zone 2. But yeah, of course, like I got sick for 9 days. I think I didn't ride in December. So that didn't help. And then I've been dealing with a little bit of a knee injury that I've had for a long time. So like what I would like to do and what I have done are not the same.
Okay.
The same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, a couple questions from all of that. So, the gym work, is that something that you do just in that period, or do you do it all year round?
I typically just do it in that period just because, like, ideally, I think I would do it year round, but just with the amount of time that we have to spend away from home and then doing like a stage race, the kind of the dealing with all the soreness of the readaptation to the gym work just becomes more detrimental than it does, positive.
Right.
But like, say you're just, I was racing on the weekends and the season was so much shorter and you can squeeze one gym workout a week and maintain that adaptation, then I think it would be worth it. But just the nature of what, racing all over the world, basically, doesn't really, it's not conducive to that.
Okay. And then when you started adding miles, so you're in can you ride outside there, or do you go are you doing indoor?
Typically it's okay. The last couple of weeks have been really unusually cold, but it seems like so I was planning on going to somewhere warm in January. I was either going to go to North Carolina, so I believe that's where you are.
Yeah, it's not warm here though.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I'm not going to drive 8 hours for it to be 3 degrees warmer, and I'm going to be on the trainer anyways. And then I had some stuff come up that I couldn't like fly anywhere. I just had like a thing I had to be home for. So I ended up not going anywhere warm. But now it's getting, to the point where you can ride outside some days. Yeah.
Cool.
Typically it's not too bad.
Yeah. All right. And then when you say, this will sound like a crazy question, but we get so many questions from people about this, like, hey, ask this person more details on their zone 2 ride. What's a zone 2 ride for you? And I'm just going to leave that so wide open.
I wouldn't say it's as like specific or religious as most people are. Like I'm not super worried about going, over zone 2 on a climb. And especially here, like in Maryland, there's so many short, punchy climbs that it would almost be like impossible to do that.
Okay.
So I just kind of, for the most part, try to stay in zone 2. Like the majority of the time I'm pedaling is trying to be in zone 2 and then kind of letting the terrain influence it a little bit.
If you're stuck on the trainer, erg or no erg, or are you like, I'm not riding zone 2 for hours on the trainer?
I typically have not done the trainer, but since I was stuck at home, I have done some longer rides on the trainer. No erg. Just riding, and try not to be too worried about it because I know that my power is typically a lot lower on the trainer. So just kind of the awareness of that and not getting kind of worked up over the fact that you did 10 watts less on your zone 2 ride or whatever. Like at the end of the day, that's not going to make the difference, I don't think.
Okay. I like that. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
So you had said somewhere, I think it might have been a Velo News article, that you're not a sprinter, but a bike rider. And that really surprised me because you win all these big races and you are just a super fast finisher. How do you see that? Explain that a little bit. As not a sprinter, are you maybe a fast finisher? You like
I mean, I'm definitely like a fast finisher for sure, but I don't want to pigeonhole myself into being just a sprinter. Which, that could be detrimental in some ways where I'm not kind of just always focusing on one thing, like sprinting, where I'm trying to be a more versatile rider. But then like races like the Nationals road race, I was fourth in the road race on an extremely hilly course over
Yeah.
212 kilometers or whatever it was. So like that's not typically conducive of a sprinter. Where if I would have categorized myself as a sprinter, I would have lost that race. Well, I did lose, but I would have been out the back before it even started because that's not typically what a sprinter does.
Right.
So like, or even just like going in breakaways, like I would rather race every day, even if it's a mountain stage, and try to be aggressive than kind of just get through a mountain stage and wait till the sprint day. Because that just seems more boring to me.
I love it though. You're like racing just like for like the excitement of it still, but you're still super fast and you win a ton of crap.
Exactly.
No, I mean, this is a compliment. It might not come out that way. I think you like surprised a lot of people who might not know you at the Nationals road race. Someone's like, dude, this sprinter is still there. I'm like, dude, this guy's pretty fast if you like look at other races he's done. So that race just, yeah, mind boggling. I'm excited to see how that shakes out this year, assuming it's the same course. But
yeah, I think it's the same.
Have you in sports, what did you play as like a kid? And the reason I ask is, were you always like a fast finisher, like like just an aggressive type like athlete, or is this something that developed over time?
I would say I was definitely like a competitive athlete compared to most people, like in school and stuff.
Yeah.
I played all sorts of sports. I wouldn't say any, I wasn't exceptional at anything else really. I ran like cross country, wasn't very good, but not exceptional. Track, I ran, mostly just endurance events as I got into high school. Like when I was a kid, I played all sorts of stuff, lacrosse, soccer, all that. But then like into high school, I was actually a pole vaulter. So that's explosive. But,
okay. Yeah. Look, I had never played lacrosse, but I picture that being like pretty explosive. I mean, there is like the cadence, it seems, when the team's going down field, but like when it's like an open ball, it's whoever can sprint that 5 seconds.
Mean, most sports compared to cycling are explosive.
True.
Cycling's 4 to 5 hours long typically. And then it ends up being explosive, but
fair enough. All right. So then what do you see as you're coming up to these early races? What's kind of like your bread and butter, maybe the endurance that you were talking about, but what do you, aside from that, what do you feel like gets you ready for the races? Is there any specific type of workouts that you do? Some people talk about VO2 max. Other people are like, no, I just do these long rides. Kind of leave it open to that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've had, if I'm preparing for a specific goal, I've had success doing several different methods of training. It really just depends on kind of where you're at before that. So coming through the winter, it's like kind of an open book where you can prepare however you want, because it's not like you were just preparing for a race and then you get home and you're preparing for the next race. So you're starting from zero. Mm-hmm. So typically I would just do long miles and then add some sprints in there for the first race. So trying not to be in absolute peak shape for that first race. But I feel like for me doing, just zone 2 with some sprints can almost get me, 90 or 95% of the way there. And then you really have to work super hard to get that last, 5% for like your peak targets. So that was like Nationals last year was an example where I did, I had a pretty good training block before that of time at home with no interruptions, and did a lot of like 4 to 5 minute efforts and then sprints, and then a few more, like I would say 4 to 5 minute like VO2 max efforts, and then some rides where I did like 3 hours of zone 2 and then some more 5 minute like threshold efforts towards the end of the ride. So kind of mixing in that, doing the intervals in the beginning of the ride and then doing them fatigued, and then also, basic endurance rides.
Cool.
Yeah.
How many, when you're doing the big endurance miles and some sprints just to get that 90 to 95% there, what type of sprint, like how many sprints would you do? Or, and if you're, is there like, do you follow by number of sprints or time at like neuromuscular power? How do you look at that?
Um, so I'll usually do them in the beginning to try to hit that peak wattage.
Okay.
But typically it's done trying to replicate a race. So like speed is obviously a huge part of it. Like it doesn't matter how many watts you do in a sprint, it matters who gets to the finish line first. So trying to visualize a little bit, like pick out a finish line, maybe at the bottom of the hill or in a tailwind section, and then 150 to 200 meters away from that, once I'm already up to speed, just try to get there as fast as possible. Rather than like, I'm not looking at my power. You can look at it after the fact, or really like time. It's more of a distance / like visualization thing, if that makes sense.
How many of those would you do in a session?
uh, Between 4 and 6, probably.
Okay.
That's that could be in addition to another workout. Like that could be, maybe I do 4 sprints, then I'll do a VO2 max interval set or something like that. Or I'll do an endurance ride, and I'll do, after the warm up, I'll do 4 or 5 sprints and then finish the endurance ride. 5 or 6 hours at zone 2. So I don't do too many like where I'm just going out and doing sprints and then coming home. It's usually just
Okay.
because it's not like it's doing 4 or 5 sprints is not super fatiguing, but it's you want to do them when you're fresh to try to maximize the the neuromuscular gains.
What are the feelings, or what makes you feel like, okay, that was a good session, or when we're like, I'm just a little bit off? Is it just the kick, or is it like finishing speed? Is it something you just feel at this point of your
Um,
career?
Definitely like when you can kind of get your cadence up pretty quickly, like your jump's good, because like sometimes if you're tired, or if I haven't been doing a lot of sprint workouts, it's just like I can't really get my leg speed up too much. And that's the idea behind doing them at speed, is because just naturally when you're going faster, your cadence is higher. So
Mm.
working on your cadence, like, yeah, it might not improve your FTP or, in a study doing high cadence work, but when you finish a race, you have to do 120 RPM in a sprint. It's just like you're not going to be able to compete without doing that. So working on that leg speed, and that's something that naturally I think I don't really have good leg speed. So working on that, in addition to getting a bigger chain ring, has
What gear are you running?
towards the end of last year, I was using a 58
Damn.
on a
Holy
road bike. Yeah,
wow. 5811 or 5810? Or are you trying not to
5811.
sprint? Oh, damn, dude.
Yeah, Shimano. So that might be a little bit overkill. Like a 56 might do it, but in these sprints, like a 54, I think I would be uncompetitive in most sprints with a 54.
Wow. Okay.
And that goes back to that I have poor leg speed. It's not all that fast. It's just like that, I try to accommodate for my weakness with a bigger chain ring.
If you had whatever leg speed you thought would be the best for you as a fast finisher, not sprinter, where are you trying to, and not that you're looking at the cadence, but where do you usually start a sprint RPM wise versus where are you finishing? You mentioned 120, but would it be higher? Or are you talking to your other buddies and they're like, oh dude, I finished at 140? Or I think this is something that a lot of amateurs over gear early, and you look at some sprints like, dude, you're starting at 7. What are you doing? You're trying to mash way too big of a gear. So what would be ideal in your mind for
Yeah, for
cadence?
sure. It really depends on the course.
Okay.
Like, you don't want to start over geared, but then you also don't want to really shift too much in a sprint. But
Mm.
it depends on the speed of the race. Like amateur races might not have as high of a speed, so the speed change is higher. Where like in a bigger race with World Tour teams, the speed is so high going into the sprint that you might increase your speed by 3 or 4 kilometers an hour, but that's really not that much. Where in an amateur race, you might increase your speed by 10 or 15 kilometers an hour. So,
Right.
um, And then it also like some of these races, like the races we do in Portugal, are the finishes are like insane that you almost have to go all by feel. You can't really they're either on cobbles or they all finish like up a 100-meter little climb into a narrow village. So there's like a lot of you almost have to go more on instinct than anything like a certain gear, or like you're not like I'm not like picking my gear,
Right.
what gear I'm in. But yeah, in a basic bunch sprint you might be able to, like on a highway sprint, but a lot of them are super technical, so it makes it more difficult to be more like analytical about it.
Okay, cool. So we sometimes make these little posts of like workouts, and one that you were talking about that sounded really good was the VO2, the sprints, and then VO2. Would you say one that you do is like you go out, do the 4 to 6 sprints, and then would you do the 4 to 5 minutes after that on like a 5-hour ride, or is that a shorter ride, or
No,
what's
that
like a
would
banger
typically
workout we could put together for people?
that would typically be like a shorter ride.
Okay.
Another workout that I do quite often is like basically 30-90s. So it's 30-second sprint up a steep climb and then 90 seconds recovery, which sounds like a lot of recovery because the typical workout would be like a 30-30 workout that's pretty popular. But then because you can recover, for that minute and a half, you can hit super high wattage for that 30 seconds, 900 watts. And that's a lot of times what you have to do in races, kicking out of turns or up steep climbs, or even like, attacking. You're hitting, sometimes 1,000 watts before the sprint, like in the beginning of the race. So that workout, but then it's also like not enough recovery that you're fully recovered for the 30 seconds.
That 90 probably goes very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
How many of those do you do?
You could do like 5 intervals and then maybe 3 sets. Okay. And then, increase to maybe four sets of 6 or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. If people haven't done full gas 30 second, that might not sound terrible, but I'm 15 of those, no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. So that those are really good insights. Is there anything that you wish you could do more of in training? And maybe this is just, you can't do everything, and maybe it's something you haven't tried before, or just because of like so much travel, it's not possible. But you're like, damn, maybe this season I need to do X, Y, and Z.
I would say just being as consistent as possible. I know that's kind of a boring answer, but like that's what everyone says is consistency is key, but it really is key. Like there's not going to be one workout that's going to make the difference. It's going to be doing the basic stuff well for months on end that's going to make the difference. So like just trying to structure my life to be able to be more consistent. And that goes back to like I like to do other stuff too, which sometimes hinders my riding ability. Like say my friends are like, oh, you want to go surfing? And we live 2 hours from the beach. Well, we got to get up at 4 a.m, drive down there, go surfing all day, drive back. Then I'm like tired and sore because I don't know how to surf. And I've been getting beat up in the waves all day. And then even the next day or the day after, it's like not, that's not an ideal prep for doing a hard workout. So even stuff like that is like, which like, that's my choice, but yeah.
Do you think though, does that help you in some way, maybe mental freshness, or just, is it like, hey, I'm going to do stuff besides cycling because I'm a human,
or just like the feeling of kind of you're missing out on other stuff, like normal people stuff, by traveling and sacrificing so much for this sport. So I try to avoid that a little bit. But also you have to, like, there's a lot of travel and you're not at home all the time. So it's kind of just the way it is.
Yeah. Okay. On the flip side, anything you were trying to do less of or remove from the life to maybe make you faster or just a happier athlete?
I don't know. We recently bought a house and I'm renovating it. So once I can finish that would be
that's a big task.
Yeah. That would be a nice like weight off my shoulders. At least we're finished to the point where we're living in it, but not, comfortable, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, that's big. Does that stress you out, or do you enjoy that project?
It depends. If it's easy, then it's enjoyable. But if it's something that's difficult, then it stresses me.
Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough.
If it goes well, then yeah, sure. But
Yeah, it can be many trips to Home Depot or
Mhm.
Lowe's. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh
So
yeah.
when you look forward to this year, and whatever you can share about like races that you know you're going to, any big goals that you have like circled, and do you feel like there's anything that if you could improve something about yourself as a rider that would help you achieve that, what would that be?
Um, I mean, I would say nationals is probably my biggest goal. It would be hard to replicate that what I did last year, just because I think everything came together, like whether it was planned or not. I was in my best shape of my life on the day of the race, which is very difficult to do again. um, and then as far as that, I don't typically like target races too much.
Okay.
I try to, at this level, especially when we're doing these races in Europe, it's almost better to be at 95% for the whole year, because you never know when your opportunity is going to come, whether it's luck or, you know, the guy we're riding for that day isn't feeling so good, and then it's your turn to, have a crack at the sprint or whatever. You never really know when when the race is going to go your way, so you kind of always want to be able to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more just like preparing for whatever the next race is. With that, sometimes you have a goal of like nationals in mind, where if I'm doing a smaller race in the US, I might train through it a little bit more. But for the races in Europe, it's usually, try to be as good as I can be for those races.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you kind of said a couple things on this before, like best shape for nationals last year, that might have been doing those VO2 workouts to get you that extra 5%. Or do you remember
Yeah.
what were you doing like the 6 weeks beforehand that you can share of just, and maybe it was things also not on the bike that just helped you be
Um,
like the best athlete for that day?
I think I did a couple of stage races that had, I think at least like a week and a half to 2 weeks in between them.
Okay.
So that gave, a chance to do the race, get a lot of good like intensity in, then go home and do, pretty good block of training, and then go to the race again and get that leg speed and that intensity in at the races. And then I had 2 or 3 weeks before nationals to like really focus on it. And then I actually think I got sick maybe 2 weeks out and had like 2 or 3 days completely off. And then so that like doesn't seem like ideal prep, but maybe in hindsight, I was just that little bit more recovered and did like had that little break, 2 weeks out. And that could have played a part into it too. But that's what like to try to replicate that, like I could replicate that and have a totally different result. So yeah, it really is difficult to
Yeah. So if
to
you
gain
had
anything.
those same two stage races this year in 2025, would you try and just slot in those other workouts that you did and be like, okay, this kind of looks similar? Or is it more you got to see how you're feeling in that moment? Or like, how would you replan that if it is so similar?
I would think I would try to like just listen to my body more
Mm.
than anything. Like there's been times where I think I should have listened to my body more often, like what I think I should do versus what typically you should, what you would think you would do. Like for example, last year I did the Tour of Portugal in July and August, so like the end of July, beginning of August, and that's an 11-day stage race that's extremely hard. Like every day is attacking. Some days we would attack for 100K before the break would go. So that's and it, on hilly terrain. So like I was just suffering every day for 11 days, and then came home and took like I think 5 or 6 days easy. But then when I got back on the bike, I tried to do, and then I was preparing for Tour of Britain. So I was trying to kind of replicate what I did before nationals, before Tour of Britain, because it was the last race of the year. I was like, I might as well prepare as best as I can. But I just felt terrible doing like those harder efforts where I had just done 11 days of basically 5-minute efforts, because if it's a climb over 5 minutes, I'm doing the bottom 5 minutes as hard as I can and then getting dropped anyways. So it was 11 days of basically 5-minute intervals. And then I was like, well, what? Like, I should just be doing some longer miles, because that's what I haven't been doing in the last 2 weeks. So you got to kind of like not, like, there's what looks good on paper, and then there's what actually you should be doing, or what I think I should just listen to my body more often, I think.
That's good. I like that, because it's really helps to verbalize like, what does listen to your body mean? Because I think amateurs who hear this from, they might be thinking, what does that mean, listen to my body? So that's really helpful. If it's not always what on paper is best, it's like, think back a little bit what you've been doing. Yeah, that's very helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah. Or like those 5-minute intervals felt terrible. And then in my dumb head, I was like, well, I should probably do more of those because I'm not doing well at them. But really, I just needed to probably just rest more, like, and do, some 3-hour easy rides or something, just to keep the legs turning over and then go to the next race. Like, yeah, try to overdo it.
Do you feel like, and the power files of, I mean, people can even look at these on Strava. I think I looked at McNulty's and maybe Sean's, the amount of just absolute smashing. It's a bike race. And I think some athletes, we can paint a picture of just how hard these races are. Do you feel like you guys at that level, let's say the top 5 of you left, is that the accumulation of all these efforts, of all these races? I mean, 11 days of racing is insane. Do you think you could have had that performance in your second year? Or is it like you've just stacked all these, so much intensity, so much big miles, or is it the top 5 are just that much better than everybody?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, obviously, talent is a thing. If you don't think talent exists, then yeah, it definitely exists. But there's also like hard work also exists. So yeah, I think and everybody kind of hits their stride at different times too. You see guys who are super good at 18, 19, and then they don't improve as much as you might, a normal trajectory. And then I feel like I'm kind of a guy who's just steadily improved every year. Like, I've never really had like a breakout season or anything like that. I've just improved a little bit every year. And that goes back to the accumulation of, hard races and training over the years. Yeah.
Anything about nutrition that is unique, or what's your kind of, it's such a big topic, but I think, people are usually really curious about what are people doing on long rides? What's your preference for races? Or is there anything that sticks out when nutrition comes up for you?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like on the bike is just getting as much carbs in as you can kind of handle, I would say. Especially like long rides, that's a good time to try to practice a little bit for the races so that you kind of know your limits. I've definitely had like races where I've pushed the limit and had stomach issues, but that's typically like, if I remember one day I was in a breakaway in a race in Europe, and I had the car behind me the whole time. So I was just taking like 80-gram bottles of carbs, and it was super hot, and I was chugging them, and then my stomach just fell apart just because I was eating way too much. Just because I had the car behind it, I was like, well, I'm in the break, like pushing a lot of watts, so I should probably, fuel a little bit more than I normally do. But that wasn't, I went over the limit. So trying to like just replicate what you do in training in racing, or what you want to do in racing in training.
So so that is something you practice? Like, what would you say is the max? Would you do like 150, or is that too much? Or not to get super granular, but people love this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It depends on the length of the race too. Like 150 for 5 hours or 6 hours is a lot.
Yeah.
But 150 for 2 hours is probably, I would say, doable. So I like to practice, on those longer rides, and especially if it's going to be hot, you need to practice in the heat, because that really affects it too.
That's a very good point about the heat. Anything that you do for heat training in specific, and maybe I'm more was thinking like when it's hot out, do you do anything just, hey, I'm going to wait till it's super hot in the middle of the day to get as much, like just go sweat. And then everyone's talking about heat training indoors. Does that pique your interest at all?
I've dabbled in the indoor heat training a little bit this winter just because I figured if I'm on the trainer, I might as well try to maximize that a little bit. And then just try to maintain that heat adaptation throughout the year because it really does take a toll on you. Even like doing saunas, you might think you're just sitting there doing nothing, but it is fatiguing and it does add, a stimulus to your overall, your body. So like just waiting till it gets hot and then doing saunas or doing, indoor heat training where you put on a bunch of clothes or the hazmat suit or whatever. Um, it sounds like it wouldn't be too fatiguing, but I think it really adds a toll. And then if you're already training as much as you can on top of that. So what I've tried to do this year is just do it in the winter and then ideally try to maintain throughout the summer.
Okay.
But yeah, I think like waiting till it gets hot to ride is, that's one strategy, but then your training's not going to be as optimized because you're fatigued from the heat. So really spiking your body temperature, like especially after the ride, I think is ideal because you get, if you say you train in the morning, it's cooler outside, then you get home and then sit in a sauna if you have access to one, or do the trainer or a hot bath or whatever you can really do. That might be ideal because you get the ideal temperatures for the training, and then you also spike your body temperature, which has that heat acclimatization.
Yeah, no, that word, it gets me. That's a really good point. And before you were talking about like you kind of mix sometimes, do the sprints fresh, other times do like the threshold efforts at the end of the ride. I know this is impossible to pinpoint exactly, but would you say you do more efforts fresh or more at the end of the day, or is it like total split? And how do you decide when you do what?
I would say probably more fresh, but also it's the higher intensity ones that are fresh. And then
Okay.
like doing the threshold at the end of the ride, every effort isn't a maximal effort doing that. It's just feels like you're already fatigued, so it feels almost maximal, but you could go a lot deeper during those intervals. And that helps with a race like nationals. That's like most of the efforts were threshold efforts up the climbs towards the end of the race after 4 or 5 hours.
So
So
crazy, dude. So crazy.
so that was kind of the try to replicate that, and then also doing the super high power at the beginning of rides to try to maximize that.
Okay. And yeah, for people that love looking at numbers, go back and find anyone that was in like the top 10 that posts their power on Strava. That Nationals road race is disgusting. Like it's just the sheer quantity of smashing is absurd. Do you have any bro science that you believe in? Something that there's really no data about, but you're just like, man, this makes me faster. I don't know what it is, but this works for me.
Nothing's coming to mind, but there's definitely something that has no
He's got secret voodoo that he doesn't
rational
want to tell us. No, it's okay.
no rational thought behind it.
No,
I
it's
mean,
all right. There might not be.
I guess like motor pacing, but I feel like that's not that would be impossible to study. That's the thing. That's why there's no science behind it, because how would you design a study trying to test motor pacing? Because I think it's beneficial because it doesn't necessarily add to your training overall like fatigue, but it improves your performance. So because of the leg speed and just getting used to riding at that speed, at least for road racing, gravel and all sorts of stuff is different. But yeah, it might. So that's like another advantage is that you can still train hard. It's not like you're like putting your body under any more stress.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And
To
I think there
improve
could be something
performance.
mental to that too. I mean, there's
Oh yeah.
things that they show like moving through space is really good for our brain's overall health. So if you're moving through space very quickly, I think it would be, yeah, yeah, I could go on a lot of tangents about that. Like the studies, you mentioned a study before of like, there's not a study about this, but like all these things that you've talked about, how many variables there are before the training begins. Like I think science is great, but it's just endurance sports are so complex to be like, this is the end all be all. I think we have to use the intuition, like just what's working for an athlete as well. So no, it's good. More motor pacing then. What's what do you think is underrated in cycling? And maybe motor pacing is one of those things, but anything that's like just people aren't doing or into that you think is very helpful in performance or just as an overall athlete?
Um, I would say doing like efforts like that are super high power that I don't typically see people doing where because in a race it's the how many times you go over 600 watts in a road race is insane.
Mm,
And I don't see as many people, a lot of people are doing a lot, a lot of threshold, a lot of endurance, a lot of VO2, but like to actually win a race or drop someone, you have to go really high power.
mm-hmm.
So not like doing that in training just makes sense. Where you might look at like, your overall power for the race, but really getting down to the efforts that you did to achieve that normalized power, that average power is like you might normalize, a certain power for a 20-minute period, but there's a lot of ways to get to that normalized power for that 20-minute period versus just
Mm.
doing that much power for 20 minutes,
What would you recommend somebody do to train that?
I mean, more sprints because also in road racing, how many times is it ending in a sprint? A lot. Like, how often are you finishing by yourself? So,
Mm-hmm.
improving your sprint is the easiest way to improve your finishing position in a race, I would say. Like, to win solo or to arrive solo is like, maybe once a season
Mm-hmm.
you can do that. I'm sure there's guys who can do it more, but like, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
it's
great
pretty
advice.
hard.
I think it's, people talk about a crit file and then it's like, well, go look at that road race file. There's so many surges. And
Yeah,
I love that you said that because I think it is very underrated, especially we have a lot of newer athletes listening to this podcast that they hear about intervals to do, but then they go to the first race and they get their doors blown off. Like, what? But I've been doing on my VO2 max. Like, well, you've never gone above 120%. That was like your hardest effort ever. So I think it's amazing that you
yeah.
bring this up. What's when you're talking about that, like, hey, okay, it does. I'm not finishing alone. What's going through your mind? You're coming into a finish. Maybe there's 5 of you. How are you sizing up people? Or maybe you're not sizing people. Maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe you're only worried about what you're doing. But can you kind of, and I realize every race is different, but like, are there any
Yeah.
like things, if you think back, like any threads that are consistent of like, okay, how the hell am I going to win this thing?
Um, I think you just got to be one step ahead of the rest of the guys in the group.
Mm,
Like you got to be quick to react to stuff too, because if somebody attacks and you don't react, and then the guy next to you doesn't react, then it's over.
mm,
So like sometimes it's better just to be the guy not taking the initiative because you're not attacking, but just being like the first to react to everything. And then yeah, just trying to see who's the fastest guy and try to be in a better position than him. So that can be hard to do if you're not familiar with the guys you're racing
I was
too.
gonna ask you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is there a way that you size people up? Like this guy, okay, this is the guy I got to beat. Is there any like tips of like how you
Um,
read another racer?
I would even say that I size people up too much in my head,
Mm,
where I should really just worry about like doing my best sprint rather than worry about really anybody else. Sometimes there's that one guy that like I need to be on his wheel coming into the sprint because he's the best sprinter and that's the best chance to beat him. But
mm,
then like some of these races that we were doing, especially in 2023, when I was on Human Powered Health, we would race, 1 day races in Belgium and France that you've never heard of. And there'd be, more top sprinters there than the Tour de France. And it's like so overwhelming. It's like, well, these are the best sprinters in the world. How am I supposed to like beat them? But then it's also like they make mistakes also. So just try to be in the right position at the right time. And not worry about like the guy who's won the last 5 races.
right. Is
Yeah.
that, I mean, something that is, I think, beneficial for like the Cat 3s out there that are going to 1, 2, 3 races? When, you're talking about races like Tour Britain, these huge mega races that some of the top athletes in the world are there. What do you guys do? You're on, Echelon's getting ready. is it just second nature to be like, we're here to do a job too, let's go, and you go and bang heads with the biggest and baddest in the sport? Or is there something like, a leader on the squad is like, yo, like gets people pumped up? Or how do you guys mentally go into that race? It's just such a huge race to be a part of.
Yeah, like some of these teams have, they show up in their massive buses and have all the best equipment and, or have won stages of the Tour de France and all that. So you kind of have to just remember that they're also normal people, just like
Yeah.
the rest of us. So try to not to get too like, I don't know, not starstruck, but just intimidated by these big World Tour teams, and just kind of, try to put our best chance of getting a result in the best position possible. And then sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, and then on the flip side, Cat 2 Joey's going to a P12. It's not NRC anymore. Whatever, is it USA Crits anymore? What, a big crit race?
I can't keep it straight.
I know I can't keep. I was like, I just always think NRC. So we'll keep it at that. It's a race that Echelon could go 1 through 3. You guys have huge squad. What are some things how do people earn your guys' respect? Obviously, people know the things that are going to piss you guys off, but when is it like you start to let someone in a little bit, or you're not, or maybe you don't? I mean, it's like, hey, we're one of the biggest teams here. Just maybe some like pearls of wisdom for the new athletes before they're on a big squad. Like, how do they get up in a position where they can actually fight for the win? When they're just outmanned and they don't have the resources, of teammates as much.
Yeah, I would say maybe take your chances in like a breakaway, an early breakaway, more often than trying to fight a lead out train, because if you get in a breakaway, you're racing a bunch of individuals, where if you're trying to fight a team like Echelon in a sprint or something, you're fighting 7 or 8 guys that are all top riders, especially in the US. So it's going to be hard to compete. And then everyone's fighting for our wheel too. So you're fighting everyone who's also fighting us.
Yeah.
So like taking your advantage in a breakaway, even if it's, a high chance that it's unsuccessful, might be your best bet to at least show yourself, get your name out there, even to like, I would pay attention to who was in the breakaway. And then, the next day, I know that you're a strong rider and you are willing to take a chance. And then, maybe you'll get a little bit more respect or a little bit more room to move around.
That is such a good tip. I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so what do you think now at where you're at, more aerodynamic or more watts?
You can't train aerodynamics, so you try to train as much watts as you can.
Okay.
Well, you can train aerodynamics, but what you're asking, which one's more important?
Just which do you think you would try? Which is there one that you focus on more now? Because I'm just thinking like you're such a fast guy and aero matters more at speed, but like you do work on watts and like you seem into trains. It's like, it's always interesting like where people go with this. Like some are hands down one way or the other. Maybe you're just like, both are important. I don't know.
I feel like once you start thinking about aerodynamics a lot, you already kind of maximized your training ability.
Okay.
So like, I'm trying to get as much gains as I can. So, but there's also only so much you can do with aerodynamics with equipment that you're supplied by a team, which we have really good equipment. So I don't really have to think about it that much. Like we have Defeat socks. They're the fastest socks in the world. The bikes it's the best bike I've ever ridden. Shimano as our, group set and wheel sponsor. So like that's, top of the line. So like a lot of it's just, I'm given.
Yeah. You're good.
So like there's not much I can really, even if it wasn't good, I couldn't do anything about it. So I don't waste my time thinking about it.
Speaking of equipment, is there anything like unique about your setup or anything interesting that you do? And maybe even more so as a fast finisher with like, do you use the special shift buttons? Do you just normally shift sprint shifters, or how's your bike set up?
Yeah, I use the sprint shifters. I wouldn't say it's like a massive game changer of any kind, but it does help a little bit. But it's not like that should be an excuse for anybody that they didn't have sprint shifters and that's why they lost. But yeah, like pretty standard.
Okay.
Like setup. I think I have like a 140 stem, so that seems pretty normal these days.
Long.
I guess the only thing I use is an ISM saddle. I don't know if you've heard of those.
Yeah.
It's more of like a triathlon saddle,
Yeah.
and I started using that because I was on a team that was sponsored by him, so
Okay.
I had to. And then when I went to a team that I could choose my own saddle, I kept it just because it's more comfortable to achieve a more aerodynamic position because you can slide fore and aft on the saddle without a change in the width of the saddle as much, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Did you
'Cause it's
convert
like a
Bassett to
coupon.
these?
I gave him a couple.
Okay. I feel like last time I talked, he's like, "Dude, we're doing ISM now." I was like, "Wait, what do you switch it to?" He's always like, "I just every once in a while we chop it up on Instagram." I'm like, "What's new with you, man?" He's always got something. I love it. You had talked about nationals. Is there any other race this year for whatever reason that you might be really looking forward to?
Yeah, Maryland Cycling Classic. So that's
Hometown.
obviously my home race. It's the only pro race in the U.S. They're adding a women's race this year, so it seems like it's growing, which hopefully will lead to more growth of cycling in the U.S. But it's kind of a chance. Like I've been riding on the course for the last 10 years, so I know the roads. Obviously, that helps. And then just being at home, like I think my mom dropped me off at the hotel last time. And everyone else is flying from Europe, so that adds an advantage also.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that's definitely nationals, and that are my two probably biggest targets.
Cool. Last question for you. If we had a crystal ball, you're only 26. I know some people be like, "Oh, I feel old at 26," but next 5 years, if you could predict the next 5 years, where do you want to take the cycling career? Maybe it's something off the bike. How would you envision that? Or maybe that's too much of a window to try and even look forward to.
I would like to try to keep riding at this level as long as I can. Because I know it's an opportunity that a lot of people don't get. And we might not be making a lot of money or any money at all. And it's when you see all your people that you went to school with having, all these big careers and everything, it's like, oh, maybe I should, start get a real job soon. But I know later in life, it's like, I got to take advantage of this opportunity while I have it. Because there's always time to do something else later on, but you can't really quit and come back to this level of the sport. So, and then I'd like to just try to win as many and as big of races as I can.
That's awesome. And I realize we don't know each other, so take this for a grain of salt, but keep going, man. Like I'm 43. I've been through corporate life. I've been through just I love riding, looking at what you athletes, the guys and women out there being pros, like there's so many ways also to turn that into a career after you're off the bike. And, if you're passionate about it, keep going. Like, don't look at the other people. I think you could ask any working person on the job. It's like, dude, you're traveling on the road racing? That sounds amazing.
Yeah, you always think it's greener on the other side until you get there.
Very, 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 very true. What's so you're on Instagram. Are you posting stuff on Strava or any other social media people can follow you this year?
I post randomly on Strava, which pisses a lot of people off, but it is what it is.
Are you posting power on Strava?
Yeah, if I post it's power,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine. Yeah. Mostly just Instagram.
Cool. We'll put your handle down there. Man, Scott, thank you so much for doing this. This was super insightful. Will be very helpful for everybody. Everybody, give him a follow on Instagram, and good luck with your training and racing, and we'll talk to you soon.